Yeah, behind the curtain. Use that for my backdrop so I can have a photo or a video or something, something going on there for the green screen. So you do it. We are live 342, and we want to talk today about the video that I put up. People seem to think it's pretty popular, so it's doing well. And that is the test that I did on two things. I guess I could have not included them both in the same video, but they are. One of them is comparing the log style turbo manifold to a header turbo manifold. And then when I did this, we did it on an asymmetrical turbo, meaning we were feeding the turbo or asymmetrical turbo setup like Saab did on their factory stuff, where we're just feeding the turbo from one side of the V8. So we have half of the exhaust energy going to the turbo. Right off the bat, not surprisingly, and we showed this, is that compared to the conventional setup where we're feeding the turbo with the Y pipe, and so both of the exhaust sides are feeding into the turbo, much better response. There's more initial exhaust energy. We can get the thing spooled up, and it shows a lot of cool things here. We can get the thing spooled up immediately in this case because we have that very responsive GTX 3584 RS turbo from RICHARDHOLDENERPEFORMANCE.com. Because we have that turbo, and we size that specifically for this test. We wanted something small enough that would make power and be responsive enough that we could get it to work. Because if you put too big of a turbo on there, you just never get any boost. And so we wanted that, but we also wanted something I didn't want to put a T20 on there or a T25 so it spool up and then end up only making 200 horsepower or whatever. We didn't want that either. So we wanted something that would not only spool up eventually, and then also could make power. We ended up making over 700 horsepower, so it did well. But it was a cool test because, first of all, we wanted to see if it would even work. Having tried this on the big block with a big header and, unfortunately, a very big collector and collector extension that we necked down, that didn't work out very well. And I need to look back and see what size turbo we were trying to run on it too. I don't remember. I'm thinking it's always the GT45, but I don't think we would have been running a GT45 on a big block. So that didn't work when we first tried it. We could only get it to make a couple of pounds of boost. And it didn't seem to ever come back, come up at the top. So trying it again on this was a better thing. So we wanted to see if it would work at all. And it ended up, yes, it did work. And I tried it first with the long tube. Well, it's not a long tube header, but a tubular header, because the turbo headers are, technically speaking, they have a shorter primary length than our typical long headers that we run on a naturally aspirated one. So we ran the exhaust on one side with this header feeding the turbo with a 3-inch elbow that we use, and the elbow has a provision for the wastegate, and then it goes up into to mount the turbo. That works fine. And we've run that on a lot of stuff. We run those on our twin stuff that we did for the Big Bang, and those work good. And we ran that with one side, and we did get boost. So when we ran that, we got about just a little over 600 horsepower. We had a rising boost curve. It looks more like a centrifugal. Down low at the load in with that header, we were not making any boost. I think that the highest we got was, 104 kPa. So half a pound of boost or something, not very much. But then it started to rise, and it rose up to 6.5 to 7 pounds out there at the very, very top. And it's interesting that we have a rising boost curve, but not surprising, especially when you look at what happens with back pressure. When you have back pressure on a turbo application, we have a rising back pressure curve. Every one that I've ever tested is like that. It may start out down below boost or whatever and rise and meet boost, or somehow it, at some point in the curve, surpass boost or be above boost all the time and then just continually rise. But it does that because we have an increasing amount of exhaust flow. And this is exactly what happened. We have an increasing amount of exhaust flow, and we got to the point where it was making a little bit of boost. And so that was adding more exhaust flow. And then therefore we were spinning the turbo faster. And then we had more boost going in and then more exhaust coming out. And we get to this point where it's, self-fulfilling, let's say, and we were able to get a rising boost curve and make more power, and it did great. So it got me thinking, you know what, we should try this. And I've been calling an FPS. It's FSP. Sorry. My apologies to the Fowler guys. It's an FSP. You know, I want to call it a log style manifold, and it's not just a, you know, it's not universal of all logs any more than that header was universal of all headers. We could make the primary length shorter. We could make the primary length smaller in diameter. We could make the collector smaller. All of those things I think would help. But in that FSP log style manifold, it exited out into a 2.5-inch V band. And then we had that T fitting that was a provision to mount the wastegate, and then the wastegate in front, and then the turbo on the top. The turbo mounted to a V band to a T4, kind of like we've been doing on the stuff that I've been running on the dyno all this time, and that worked really good. I had people argue with, oh, you should have the turbo in the front where the wastegate is, and then have the wastegate. I'm like, no, you shouldn't. You want it to be wastegate priority. You want the flow of the exhaust to be going in the direction of the wastegate. That way you have the best possible wastegate response. I would argue that instead of a straight 90 like this is, that it would be better if we had a gradual bend and went up to the turbo like on the ones that we've made. But this thing did fantastic. And that's because you have pressure inside there and exhaust flow, and it makes the turbo go, and it, we have turbo goodness and all that. So it works just fine. But guys want to, pick their nits. So it's just ridiculous. But when we put that on and then had same turbo, same intercooler, piping, all of that, all of that stuff is the same. And you also notice that we put the wastegate reference line to the top of the wastegate to keep it closed. So we have boost pressure plus spring pressure. And as long as that's more than the back pressure that would try to push this open, that wastegate's just going to continually stay closed. It's basically set on kill. And so we're just relying on the available back pressure from the motor. And the motor is a 5.3 L33, has our low buck truck camshaft in it, the ideal camshaft, the ideal turbo camshaft, or NA camshaft, or nitrous cam, or whatever you want it to be. But and it made like 435 or 440 NA. And so it did very well. And then it works good because it has good low speed response. And then, that helps get the turbo spooled up. Gets the turbo spooled up, and obviously then good things happen. But when we had the FSP exhaust on there, we started out on the load in with more boost. Like we had about 2 pounds more on the load in, and then ended up at 11 pounds out at the top. So quite a bit more boost, more than 4 pounds, and a lot more power. So we made over 700 horsepower with that combination. And it just goes to show you that, and we can talk about, you guys can let me know what you think. Did it do that because everything's so much smaller, and we just are trying to push the same amount of exhaust energy? If the NA power was making that much, trying to push the same amount of exhaust energy, and so we're getting more velocity into the turbo. Well, you could talk about all of that stuff. Well, what I can tell you is it did work better. The smaller log style manifold definitely offered more response in this case. And so what I want to see, and you guys, the guys that are watching this after the live feed, but maybe the live feed guys too, any of the guys that are thinking about going to LS Fest, I want to see somebody try this at the track. I want to see somebody run this. And I mentioned in the video at the end, I think you could do even better than this. There would be ways, and you guys throw some out there. There would be ways that you could improve the spool rate of this thing even more. You could do a quick spool valve. You can make the exhaust even smaller. You can make the turbo smaller. You could do all of those things. But one of the things I mentioned is I'd like to see somebody try a compound turbo on this and add a smaller turbo to this to get this turbo spooled up, so that you could make 800 plus horsepower with this GTX 3584 RS turbo. But if you put a smaller one in there, some sort of T3 or even T3 T4 hybrid in there, and use it as a compound, get that turbo spooled up really quickly, and then use the other turbo to compound the boost, and we got good stuff happening. That would be interesting, but do it all off of one side. The other thing that I would like to try that we didn't do is I want to read the air fuel on both sides of this motor. I want to see if we do need to add more fuel on the non back pressure side, if that's doing better, for whatever reason. I want to see if the air fuel is consistent from side to side. I kind of think that it's going to. I kind of think that it's going to be close, given the fact that, you know, it's pressurized on all 8 cylinders, and we're providing the amount of fuel that it would be for a pressurized environment. I just don't know with less back pressure if, you know, maybe there would be a little bit of a change that to make it even better. I would like to kind of try that, but it was very, very cool. And so just getting this thing to work was awesome because when you try neat, new, weird things, it's always good. And then by doing this asymmetrical turbo, this is the first time I've seen it on an LS. Doing this, I think, exaggerates what we're trying to look at in terms of the response rate for the header and the log manifold, because what overshadows this, if we have a situation where we're feeding the exhaust to the turbo from both sides, we may always have enough, even though it's a little better maybe with or more responsive, let's say with a smaller Y pipe or a smaller log style, you know, exhaust manifold. We already had enough to do it. And so even with the header and the one that's not as responsive, that we had enough, and it spooled up, and we got the turbo all the way up to where we were using the wastegate, and the wastegate's open. And so, you know, we're making all the boost. And so we have to get to a point where we're not there. And so we could see what the response rate is. And this asymmetrical turbo deal, doing it off one side, definitely puts us there. It definitely shows us, hey, look, this is what response does. This is the change in response. And so it worked out really good. The other two things, or a couple things that I'd like to see, is I'd like to see if at the same boost level that if the asymmetrical turbo makes more power. And the reason that I ask that is because we know I didn't monitor it, and I should have, but I feel pretty confident that we would have less back pressure running it this way than we would having all of the exhaust go to the turbo. Stands to reason. We should have less back pressure. And so maybe the turbo would make more power at the same boost level. It'd be interesting to see. I would like to, you know, figure out whether or not that's true. And like I said, I want to see somebody run this because I think it would be cool. Let's see what you guys got going on today. Will never work. He'll never work. I know we got that a lot. That can't work. A lot of people were very, very surprised. They're surprised, one, that it even works, and then maybe equally surprised, like I said, we create a situation where we could better show the change in response rate between these two setups. The other thing that we didn't talk about at all is, and I wish that I would have gotten the back pressure data on both the header setup and the FSP setup. I'll keep saying that correctly, and the FSP log style setup, because I think it's almost a guarantee that the one that had the most response rate also had the highest back pressure. I don't think that that's too much to assume that. And so if we're looking at the beginning part of the curve here and seeing, hey, look, we're doing this and trying to make a lot of power, especially with an asymmetrical turbo. We need the back pressure. We don't have enough. We need more. But on a setup where we're running these exhaust manifolds, or this type of exhaust manifold versus the header on something that's a very high-end deal, we're interested now on the other side of that, because you're trying to get like big turbos, and you've got a two-step, and you've got a stall converter, and you got all that stuff. And so now you're trying to make 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 horsepower. Well, I honestly think that the log style manifold with a higher back pressure caused just by that system is going to hurt you there. So I think that the headers would be better particularly because they've dropped the back pressure. I think that they flow better. And then I think ultimately you get to the point where the turbo is kind of the setup, is kind of the limiting factor in terms of back pressure. But the turbo setup is going to flow more and be less restrictive. And then we could talk about whether or not it makes power because of the runner length and everything. I don't think it does that. I think that these flow a lot better. It sounds quite a bit different, but there's a big sound difference between one and the other of these things. And so again, we choose, just like we were choosing our camshaft for what we wanted to do, we're choosing our turbo for the power output we want to make. And then you choose your manifolding for other reasons too. We would choose it, like I talked about, for, do you want more response down low or ultimate power up the top? Do you need to make it and have it be like this just to fit your application? Like if the header doesn't fit, you're not going to put a header on it. The log style manifold will work, and then you got to play with, okay, power output versus flow and all that, and you got to decide on that. It's all good stuff though. Which is better, a 572 board out to 583 with twin charge setup, or a twin turbo boxer motor? What do you mean by boxer motor? I can't believe how much more power the log manifold had. Yeah, it just had more boost because it had more exhaust energy. There's a stupid amount of spammers in your last video. I reported them to kick them out. It's something you should keep an eye on. I go into the comment sections of the video and delete every one of them. So they're all gone. I just delete them from the channel. And so they're just new. They just make up new names and just try to, you know, because they're just trying to get in on something that's popular. And so they, whatever these girl things are or stuff. But as soon as the video comes up and I start seeing stuff, I delete all of them. Would much rather run a bigger turbo that spools a 3500 and uses both sides. I don't see the value of one manifold. Okay. It seems like the setup is greater for a constricted engine bay. What was the difference in back pressure from one side to the other? We don't have that. I don't have that data. There was no back pressure on the other side, on the open header side. Richard, time for me to install my 6-liter. Did you get it all back together, and is it working right? Is this turbo set up for a front-wheel drive LS car? It could be. You could just do the front manifold on it and have it run like that. Ads already? Yep. Let the guy make a living. Ads won't kill you. Exactly. I'm trying to make a living. I don't think I chose the right. I don't think I chose the right thing. How did the EGTs compare from header to the turbo side? I don't know. We didn't run EGTs on it. We ran EGTs. There were EGTs available just on the header side, but not on the turbo side. I could go back and look and see, I guess, and see if there's an EGT difference between the NA runs and then when it was turbocharged. I would expect that there would be, because we have a lot less timing in it. Would the NA bank run leaner due to there being less restriction to flow on that side? What would O2 sensor readings look like bank to bank? I don't know. I wish I would have done that. Is Marvel Mystery Oil 3-in-1? Sure would make piping easier. Yeah, it could. I think it can. I think that you know, I think that this could solve some problems as long as you could get it to work. And one thing I pointed out in the video is that I think it would be easier on a 4L60 transmission because a rising boost curve, I think, would be better. This makes adding a turbo to a front-wheel drive car a whole lot more doable. I want to see people do it. I want to see people try it. It definitely works. Let's see. So when you have a merge to a 2-inch opening instead of a 3-inch, it spools faster and makes more power than the bigger 3. So one of the reasons I swapped the GTX 3584 to the S366 was I was scared to run more than 8 PSI because of all the torque at 1800 on a 5.3. A higher stall would help, but then I'd be running a G42. Okay. If you do a compound, add any of the superchargers that you have, what would be the difference in EGT stress from side to side? I don't know that there would be a problem with stress side to side. And if I did a compound, I wouldn't do a blower. I would do another smaller turbo is what I was talking about in my discussion. Just picked up a 52 Chevy 3100 panel truck on a station wagon chassis with a 454 Turbo 400. What is the best way to unseize the engine from? Is it seized up because it's rusted now? If it is, you're gonna have to take it apart. You could try spraying oil and WD-40 in the cylinders. I'm hoping that the plugs were in it the whole time and that water didn't get down into the intake. If it did, you're going to have to take it apart because it's rusted on the cylinder bores and the rust could be pretty thick. As boost pressure rises, tuning between the two banks may become a nightmare. We're assuming that it's different to begin with. Asymmetrical, as in one turbo hooked up to only one bank. Yes, that's exactly what we did. We ran the turbo off of one side of the motor. I love the video, Richard. The possibilities for packaging and unique platforms is cool. Yep. Does that make something weird happen inside the engine when pressure differences from side to side? There's no pressure differences from side to side. The engine and the combustion chambers all have boost on them. The only thing that happens is on the hot side, one side has back pressure and one side has less back pressure. You know, it might have a little bit just from the header, but not very much. But I don't think that does anything inside the motor. Getting away with no crossover and less piping under the hood of a Corvette or Camaro, the asymmetrical deal could be a hell of a package. Yeah, it could. And I think that the other thing that's nice is if you look at it not as a comparison to a turbo thing, like I showed what it did on, you know, a normal single turbo makes more power everywhere because it has more exhaust energy and it makes more boost and all that. But if you compare it to a centrifugal, all of a sudden you have a turbo now that doesn't have the drive, the parasitic loss associated with the drive. So at 10 pounds of boost or whatever, this asymmetrical deal will probably make more power than a centrifugal blower will, I would think. Maybe surprised at how much more air is moving through the NA side. This is a very interesting test. Maybe grind a custom asymmetric cam to help meter air volume. Nope, don't want to do that. Don't think that that's even necessary. If I wanted to do anything, I would like to see what the air fuel is on that side. Obviously, it wasn't bad enough to hurt anything because we made lots and lots of runs. So I'd like to see what it is. And then if it is problematic, I'm running a system where I can run it. Even on a batch fire, I can richen up or lean out that side if we wanted to do that. Must have been 15. Oh, no, Eric, I appreciate it. That's good. Hey, Eric, if you see something, say something. There won't be an EGT difference. Yeah, I don't. Well, there would be an EGT difference between the NA runs and these runs on that open header side. There almost surely is going to be that. But because if we're running one with 29 degrees and we're running one with 20 degrees, there's going to be an EGT difference. But I don't know that there would be from side to side on the turbo and non-turbo side. Feeds all 8 cylinders. The only difference is the back pressure because the turbine housing is a restriction. For all 60E, 365 foot-pounds max load. There's an old book, Turbochargers by Hugh Bickins. Yeah, I have that up here. I've read it cover to cover like 85 times. There's some interesting setups. It's a very good read. He has all the setups. Yeah. No, I have that. I have Superpower, which is another one that came out. I had all of the older. I have Corky Bell's deal. Corky Bell's was way later than that. Would you use a 2.5 or 3-inch crossover Y pipe diameter on a 496 big block Chevy single turbo setup using stock exhaust manifolds? Well, what is the exit out of the stock exhaust manifolds? What size is that? I don't think it's going to matter for what you're doing. Back pressure doesn't change EGT. It might. We might want to look at that. Back pressure is not going to change it nearly as much as timing is, I wouldn't think. Would there be an unintentional EGR on the turbo side to affect timing or air fuel ratio? Do you mean would there be exhaust backfeeding this thing? Jordan, driving home in the snow, spark plug in the 454, throttle closed with everything covered and an air cleaner on it. No water got in it. Okay. Yeah, so but I'm curious why it's not spinning over then. I just put a we just put a one of the extendable ratchets on the damper, and it should spin pretty freely like that. If you want to spray, like I said, some oil or WD-40 or that kind of thing in the cylinders in through the spark plug holes, so that it goes down where the rings are, that should help it spin over. Single turbo system, just enough exhaust to make boost. Sounds like the 75 Thunderbird that only had a cat on the driver's side bank of exhaust. Cleaned up emissions just enough to meet regs. Richard's currently YouTube featured. My video is. Have you tried turning the engine by hand from the crank pulley? Yeah, that's hit the lotto with the subject. It is good stuff. I like doing different stuff. Obviously, you're never going to pick like a guy that, and I can already see if you took it to LS, somebody took it to LS Fest, all of the, big boost, high horsepower drag racers are going to go, why would you ever do that? Why wouldn't you just run it all? Dude, try something different. Experiment. It's fun. You should try it. You got my email about offering a reverse rotation turbo, pricing the same. I don't know if that's available. We can check and see. Part 2, different AR for single fed versus dual fed. The AR is not going to change it significantly enough. You would need to change the turbo size to make that happen. We are going to be doing some AR testing though. Will 706 outcompete a 243 head if you modified the 706 smaller valve to match the 243 head? I asked because my heads are at the machinist and the 243 has a 64cc chamber and the 706 has a 61. You can port a 706 and put big valves in it so it flows better than as good as any head. So if you want to do that, if you want to go to that length, you can. You can also do that with a 243 head. You could just mill the 243 head, and then you could get that down to 61cc chambers if that's what you want. There's lots of ways to make that work. I think ultimately, if you're liking the 243 head because it has a bigger valve, I don't know what you're trying to do here, but just mill the 243 head. I'd have to measure, but I'm pretty sure big block manifolds are 3-inch. That's what the exit is on a 3-inch. Then I just make it 3-inch. Almost all of the stuff that we've run is the big block stuff anyway. They've all been 3-inch Y pipes. I dumped a bottle of Marvel Mystery Oil in it, letting it sit for a week or two. Okay. But did you pour it into the carburetor or the manifold? If you poured it into the manifold, and you want it to get into the cylinders, you got to make sure that the valves are open for it to get past the valves. I was actually wanting to ask something about this test. 454 on a GT45, only running 6 cylinders through the turbo to make 600 horsepower, but avoid 2-to-1 back pressure. Didn't want to get ridiculed. No, that's fine. You can do that. We talked about that before. Racers have done that where they ran on a V8, ran only 6 of the cylinders feeding the turbo. That's been done. Honestly, if you're only wanting to make 600 horsepower out of 454 and had a GT45 on it, I wouldn't worry about the back pressure. You're probably not running very much RPM, which is where the 2-to-1 occurs. I just wouldn't worry about it. Like if you're running at 5,000 or 5,500 RPM, I would just put that on there and run it. Are you able to control spark timing along with fuel per bank? Yeah, we can do true sequential if we want. I cut the bells off. Power steering C's, water pump C's, alternator C's. I tried a bar on the front of the crank with plugs. No luck. Yeah, that has me worried about rust in there. Been sitting under a billboard tarp for 20 years. 70 people watching, only 39 likes. Everybody hit the thumbs up. I have 706 heads, so I was wondering if it was worth it since I would have a higher compression ratio of 706 heads for my twin GT45 build. Why do you need more compression for that? The turbos are going to dictate what the power is. I poured it down the spark plug holes. Okay, that's better. I want to not open it up because the 77 C10 truck motor with 48,000 miles on it, but I may have to. Yeah, if it doesn't spin over, I would start leaning toward, because even if you free it up, you you can you look in there and see anything? Can, can you do a bore scope or anything? Can you look in there and see? Because you might have a bunch of rust in there, which you have to take it apart for anyways. You're not going to run it. You're not going to want to run it like that. Even if you're get the oil and it breaks it free, and the pistons and the rings, which are going to be rusty now, are going to push all that rust or scrape that rust off. Guys have run them like that before, but it's really not good. Remote mount a TX 20, 25, or 30 supercharger. It has a 12V clutch on it. Its own oil supply. 20 is 2 liters per revolution. What are those? What are those from? I have a bore scope. I can look into it. I've not done it. I live an hour from the truck. Okay. Yeah, I just would want to see. I mean, if it has, it might have like a puddle of water that was in it, and then that whole area is just full of rust. The rings, the side of the bore, all of it. And you know, you could force it and make it work. Like sometimes you can rock it back and forth and scrape that rust off. Then you got a bunch of rust in there. I'm wondering if getting the bigger valve would have more benefit. It is. If you put a 2-inch valve in a 706 head, it definitely flows more as long as you cut the seat for it properly. Yeah, a 2-inch valve, like you take the valve from a 243 head or 799 head, you can use that and then cut it. You obviously can do porting. I myself would do unshrouding the chamber. Queen, what's going on? Listening while doing work on the brakes. New C6Z06 heads have been fixed. Your experience, how much of a time bomb is the LS7? Internet would have you thinking it's just a matter of time. I honestly don't know. I don't have a lot of experience with LS7 stuff. I'm told that the seats or guides or something drop out of them. But other than that, I don't really know any more than you do about it. I'm not an LS7 owner. I think if I had one, I think I would try to fix it just because if that comes apart, it's going to destroy a lot of stuff. Do you have any running 3800s laying around? I don't. I have only one, I think, right now. I might have the parts to do another one. But I only have one that's all apart, and that's the Big Bang one. And it just needs to be put back together. But it's not going to be running after we run it on the dyno. Good evening. I have to apologize for talking smack about Phytech Pro tuning the other day. Apparently it's right there included. I just needed to make it show instead of hide on the handheld included for free. Okay. See, we all learn stuff. Are you leaving? Oh, ooh, I like your hair. Are you taking Owen? Okay. I'll see you. Drive safe. Rumors L7 is a tough engine to build competition style. A friend just bought a 2013 Camaro and an LS3. He's wanting a cam for it that has steady chop that makes good power, or recommended a BTR Stage 3 or TSP cam. Yeah, that's fine. There's lots of good choices out there. The TXs are from Kawasaki Jet Skis. I run a 14 on the Dodge, 2.2 draw-through setup with the 341 CW for the main course. Roll the windows down and hit the AC button. It activates the supercharger. Okay. What kind of power will those things support? That would be a good one for me to run. Seems like it would be a good one for me to run on the 1-liter Metro. Did you ever test a dual plane multi-port injected intake on an LS? I have not run. I haven't seen one that's a port injected converted dual plane. I mean, you certainly could do it, but I haven't seen one yet. All caught up now. I'm wondering, would the response rate translate to running twins? I don't know what you mean. The thing that would happen, I think, maybe I do understand what you're thinking. Are you saying that if we run it from one side and it's boosted, is this what we could expect running twins on this thing? The answer is no. What you would get is better response rate with twins. Because if you're spinning the other turbo using the exhaust from the other side that you're otherwise wasting, it's going to put more air in to the inlet tract. And so you're going to have more exhaust. Even if they're not terribly responsive, you're still going to have more. So it's going to be better than we're seeing here with an asymmetrical turbo. Where'd you get the FSP log manifold? They sent it to me, but they sent it to me long ago, and I hadn't used it. I finally dusted it off. It was full of dust. Finally dusted it off, and now I'm mad at myself for not having run it earlier, because we're going to run 2 turbos, because I have one for the other side too. So we're going to run twins on it. I have a 5.3 and a small T28. I'm getting ideas for a 2-stage asymmetrical setup. Yeah, the 28 would be good to have in conjunction with a bigger turbo. That might work. If you had some really small twins feeding a huge turbo, all 3 turbos going into different size inlets on an intercooler, and then one big intake. Here, this becomes a problem unless you're taking the turbos and like the 2 small turbos and feeding them into the inlet of the bigger turbo. That's the way to make it work. This is compounding it kind of. If you do it the other way, where they're all blowing their air into the intake manifold or into an intercooler, you get backfeeding. So the turbos that spool up before the other one will backfeed the other turbo, and it doesn't work very well. And then the big turbo will overfeed the smaller turbos if it gets spooled up. I have a factory 350 in my 71 Monte Carlo. What's the best, safest way to 500 horsepower blower or turbo? I think nitrous would be high maintenance. Yeah, either a blower or a turbo. Vortec makes good things. ProCharger, a lot of those guys. Torque Storm has stuff. Not very many Roots blower things. You could do a blower shop 671 or that kind of thing, but a 350 to make it NA 500 horsepower would be a lot. So you're almost, you could, it's just not going to be very drivable, and it's going to be very expensive, but a small turbo would easily do it. I'll send you one if you like. Hyde Motorworks has an 80 millimeter pulley if you want constant boost. No, I don't really want that. What I already ran the AMR blower on there, and the AMR though was damaged, and I was going to get another one, and I wanted to compare the supercharger versus a turbo. So we're going to run a small turbo on there, and I wanted to compare that, but I want something that's going to make like 6 or 8 pounds or something, not very much. That's why I asked what sort of power output do these things make? We're talking about a motor that makes like 58 horsepower NA, and we want it to make like 60 or 70 at the tire. Would a 6-inch air-to-air intercooler be enough for a twin setup? Is it 6 inches thick or 6 inches wide or 6 inches tall? What dimension is that? Watching the live feed in 2 times speed, trying to catch up. 3 minutes. Keep going, Andy. Keep going. Can't seem to find them on the internet. The manifold would solve my problems of clearance. I built a 5.3 Gen 4. It had a BTR stage 4 truck cam, and I hand parted the heads. When I got dyno, the guy's telling me it made 461. Do you find that high? 461 at the flywheel or 461 at the tire? 461 at the tire is probably not realistic. I mean, it's not realistic. 461 at the flywheel. What are your guesses on the outcome of only spooling from one side? If a given turbo normal configuration makes X at 20 pounds, what do you think the loss will be? 25%? Do you mean the comparison between the not having the back pressure, basically? So like we ran 15 pounds with an asymmetrical turbo and then 15 pounds running the normal route. It would depend on how much back pressure we're getting rid of. I don't know what the drop would be. We saw a big change in power between the G42 and the 3584 in terms of back pressure, but I don't think that that's the only thing that caused the difference in power. I would like to try that and see. I can go through my data and look and see if I have anything that's at that 11 PSI or so range from our testing. But I don't think that I do. I think that that's the problem, is I don't. Well, I take that back. I'll go through and look and see if there's a difference. Otherwise, I'd like to do a dedicated test and see. But I'd also like to monitor back pressure while we do that. Chris, happy to help. What is a stronger block I can use to build a sledgehammer type twin turbo Corvette out of my 89 6-speed? Please help. You can use a Dart block. And you won't want to use TPI on it. They didn't use TPI on theirs. They didn't use long runner stuff. It's going to need to be a shorter runner for you to make the kind of power that you want. Can you test the cheap Amazon cast turbo kits in LS for a budget build? I don't know which ones you're talking about. The inlets are 6 inches wide. Not exactly sure on the physical size of it, but apparently it's for a twin setup. But I'm shooting for 1500. The 1500 horsepower turbo or intercooler that we used on the Big Bang stuff is a 3-inch in and a 3.5-inch out. And I think it should be a 4 out and a 3.5 in. It might be that. I can't remember which one it is, but it has 2 of the cores that we normally run like for 1,000 horsepower. The other problem with that setup is that we have the way that they did the water routing is not good either. I just like it to go in and out, like in one side and out the other side, but they loop it. And so that's not a good way to go. Why do people not use longer dual plenum intakes? The dual plenum intakes are problematic only because you have to have 2 throttle bodies. Why only 6 pounds on the Metro? That's all that I want to test with initially, because this motor is not the turbo sprint motor that I'm putting together for Bonneville. I just want to run 6 pounds so that I can run an FMU on it, a pump, and not worry about it. And I just want to run 6 or 8 pounds or whatever and see what it does, and then compare the blower to the turbo, and then that motor's coming out and coming apart. All right, Eric, man, we'll see you. I have a 5.3 LC9, hand-ported 243s, high ram, 8711, forward 30 over, Summit forged pistons and rods. What's a good RPM for this cam? Well, Caleb, tell me the specs again on the 8711. That's a big cam, isn't it like 230 something? TX14 supercharger is compact roots unit with about pertinent on the application that it's on. What is that motor rated at with the supercharger? 461 at the flywheel. It had a dual plane with a 650 double pumper. I just thought it was kind of high. That seems high to me for Brandy. It seems high to me for a dual plane intake manifold on that application. Test the G42 with a stricter plate before the turbo for more back pressure. You want to cap off one side of the G42, or just put a quick spool valve on it or something? Actually, the G42, like on a 6-liter, and we're looking into getting a different AR for the hot side, but a G42 on a 6-liter I think is going to work really good. 5 psi for standard pulley, 13 for 80. So I still need to know what is the motor rated at? How much power does that jet ski or whatever kind of thing it is, how much power does that motor make? What do they rate that motor at? Half on a 6.0 seems like the right displacement to spin the small turbo. Yeah, on the 6-liter, it would be more responsive than it is obviously on this 5.3 because you'd have more low-speed response. You'd have more low-speed torque. What are the pros of an asymmetrical turbo setup? It's a lot easier to install. It has a rising boost curve, which is good for transmission safety, let's say. It has less back pressure, so our theory is that it would make more power than the same turbo at the same boost with all of the back pressure. And it's cool because you can say you have an asymmetrical turbo, and nobody else can say that. After seeing your test, I'd gladly try to run 6 to 7 horsepower turbo on one side of my daily. I bet it would help keep the transmission for a few runs longer. I think it would. The Quinn, you have to decide the cons yourself. Actually, you have to decide the pros yourself too. I've seen some McLarens on Copart with asymmetrical turbos. And that one, the turbo had been crushed by an accident. That's sad. The guys at McLaren know how to make power. Quinn, did you watch the video? You gotta watch the video, and it goes through all that stuff. But it was definitely less responsive. They know how to make power, but I wish they used stronger internals in their engines. Who, the McLaren guys? The TX14 is a supercharged MR2 engine, 145 horsepower. Okay. What are the smaller ones that are used in the? Didn't you say some of them were used on some of the watercraft deals? That's probably, that supercharger is bigger than we would want. That's about the size of the AMR 500. I'd like to find something smaller than that, actually. The AMR 500 should support 150 horsepower, so judging by the airflow. Your asymmetric turbo is an exhaust valve away from having a quick spool option. Why does it need another exhaust valve? You mean putting a quick spool valve on it? Wish I had $3,000. Local guy has a 403 Olds and a 400 Pontiac for $1,100. Then I could use the other 1,900 for fuel to deliver to Richard. It does cost a lot, right? Are twins more reliable on a high horsepower application? I've heard about the driver's side bank running hotter and causing problems. I don't know why that would be. Don't understand what that would be. Twins are not more reliable than a single. The reliability has nothing to do with one or two of them. In fact, you could argue that if you have two of them, do you have two now that can break instead of one? But I don't think it's a reliability thing. Now building a 6-liter with a sloppy stage 2 rec port heads, flat top pistons with a multi-port fuel injected single plane. 1,000 CFM throttle body. What do you think that would make? Rec port heads, flat top pistons, and a single plane. I don't know about the single plane. I think when I put the sloppy stage 2 in the LY6, I'm thinking it was like 510 or 520. Something like that. I don't know what single plane you're using, so whether it would be better than what we did or not. Usually the carbureted manifolds don't do well. Let's see. There we go. Yes. 513 is what it made on the LY6. That was with the LY6 heads and rec port heads and a rec port intake manifold. Okay, both exhausts into the turbo to spool, then a Y valve back to asymmetrical low back pressure. Oh, so you want to reroute the exhaust from one side back out just to itself? I mean, out to atmosphere at some point? How much cam is too much cam? My buddy claimed he had a Z06 with a big cam that made the car almost undrivable. He said it would only have 1 or 2 pumps on the brakes, then it was done for. So did he have, on some cams, if they're really big, they don't create enough vacuum. And so you could use a vacuum canister for that. But that's not a good cam to have on a driver. Would twin spool faster than a big single? No, not usually. I would argue that they don't, as long as they're both sized to make the same power. So you have 2 500s and 1 1000, and then it would come down to the exact turbos that you're using, because some 500s spool faster than other 500s, and then you could adjust the AR and the impeller, the wheel and all that stuff. So, but single versus twin is not really a thing. The jet ski versions are larger than the TX14 with a stock pulley, no intercooler, adds 40 horsepower, intercooled stock pulley. Okay, I thought that they had factory ones that had superchargers on them that were smaller than the one that they would have used on the Toyota, and would have made some of those aren't some of those jet skis, aren't they like 200 horsepower or something? Could you explain theoretically the amount of flow on a high back pressure engine? For example, would it be enough to spin a third turbo on a twin setup? Yeah, you can hook a third one up to that if you want, and it should be enough to spin it. How strong does a cam need to be? I wonder if 3D printing them with a sintered metal printer for rapid prototyping would be horribly stupid. I think it'd be very, very expensive. Running one of those asymmetrically on a 496 wouldn't be too far off from running it normally on a 4.8. Okay. But if you're just using displacement there, and that's not like, is it a 400 horsepower 496 or is it a 600 horsepower 496? Supercharged jet skis are 250 to 300 at the pump. Okay. Big cams were made the assumption that you have friends to push your car on the starting line. The printer would be expensive, but I imagine it would allow rapid testing of some very minor changes. For the goals you're after, just get a China clone of the IHA turbo from the Sprint Firefly. I already have the factory turbo, so that's not a problem. Or is it a 235 horsepower 496? Yeah, it's probably not that. Even a stock 8.1 would spool the turbo up. I've also witnessed an M90 on a 1.3 Suzuki Swift. Yeah, that's more than enough blower for that. Yeah, Sean, maybe they'll start doing that. I don't know what the cost is, The hardness of a cam is a lot. I don't know that you can duplicate that on a printed thing. I don't know if you could get the depth of the hardness that you need. I don't know if you'd have to change materials to do that, or I just don't know. Got the core support cut out of my project. I'm upgrading the new core support for a bigger radiator. I saw the evil grin M90 at Metro. No, I have zero interested in that. Much more interested in turbo motor for that, because that's what we're running at Bonneville. There be any gains running 799 heads on turbo 5.3? I have the stock 862s still with everything, but would need to buy valves and intake manifold for the 799. Could I do asymmetrical heads? Yeah, you can put one head on one side, one head on the other. It's not going to make any difference. I wouldn't change the heads that you have. Just run the heads that you have. And the turbo is going to decide what kind of power you make. The heads aren't going to do anything. Sean, I support this message with the M90 on there. That's probably twice as much blower as that thing needs. I want to see how Turbocentric did. I think that he was going to the dyno or going to the drag trip this weekend or something. What do you think about printed intakes? Printed intakes are definitely a thing. They're already doing that. I don't know about printed collectors for exhaust. I don't know how can they do that and make it strong enough for that, for the temperature. I mean, I guess they could print almost any kind of material now, but 3D printing is good for, I think it's good for rapid prototyping stuff. I don't know that it's good for production stuff yet. I remember when people called us crazy for upgrading to an M90 on the 2-liter Focus. Yeah, I know. What did Oscar's, did the 2-liter Focus come with an M62 or did it come with an M45? Because I remember having to fight with him to get the upgrade for that. I'm like, this thing is not going to do it. And so I needed to make like I think we needed to make 235 at the tire to get it to make the power output that a 462 valve made at the tire. M45. Yeah, I know they use that on the smaller Honda kits, but I think that we ended up putting a 62 on there. It needed a 90. Heck, it needed a 112. What it got was a turbo eventually, and that cured everything. You can print Inconel exhaust valves now. That's pretty good. That's a lot of temperature. I did it on Ecotech 2.4. Also had it on Twin Cam 2.4. Didn't some of those motors came with blowers on them, right? Came with smaller blowers on. Might as well put a bigger one on there. Although a twin screw, if you're going to keep with that positive displacement blower, I think would be a better application. That way you could keep the temperature down and keep the efficiency up. Or just put twin turbos on, because that works too. That's good stuff. So now I got to figure out what the next test is. Maybe the exhaust. Maybe the 6-liter. Let's switch gears a little bit. They're doing interesting things with fluid collectors, conversions, and port spacing. Some nice stainless and Inconel collectors out there. Yeah, I would want to see and want to do like testing for applications to see what all of the magic is. Jordan, what am I doing on all motors? that already sounds like a lot of work. That already sounds like an impossibility. Twins on the 6-liter. Yeah, I think Jimmy and I were talking about this. We think that looking at the data that twin, well, I'm pretty certain of this. Twin GTX 3584 RS turbos that we have, 2 of those, the response rate of those would be less than the single G42 1200. The G42 is actually pretty good. M62 is on the LD9. Supercharger intake on the LSJ has the same port spacing as a Neon engine. Very close. Next test, Visor calculate header lengths. I don't know what test you're talking about. Sounds like Jordan wants to employ you. Test your turbos on a lot of motors. We are going to. We're going to run them on because that's what I do on this channel. We're going to run it on a lot of different things, Fords and Chevys and Dodges and all kinds of stuff. Big blocks and small blocks and 4 cylinders and all of it. Rob's making a single rotor turbo with all aluminum parts. See, I think that's really cool. I like that. I saw that earlier in a Gen 1 Miata. Billet aluminum rotor. That's cool. I think that's as cool as the 4-rotor or the 12-rotor. Do you have any tests on the effects of 90-degree elbows at the end of a shorter header extension? I've had them to deflect heat away from the rear end housing. Now it's the new rage in sprint car racing. Are you using the 90-degree as an extension of the length of the collector extension? I would like to see a test of, for that, I would like to see a test of a straight section and that curved section to see if there's any difference other than the change in length that you get from the collector extension. Because we know that there's a difference from that stuff and that affects it. But I don't know that the 90 has any effect on that. I believe Visor header lengths have to do with him claiming equal length isn't optimum, and he gives measurements for each pipe based on exhaust pulses. I love David, but and I don't know if it's a lack of communication here or whatever, but there's no one optimum length for a header. Header primary lengths are the same as tuning on an intake runner length. It will affect where it makes power. So it depends on what you want to do. There's no optimum set of headers. There's no one set of headers that are going to be perfect. There's one set of headers that could work, for your application, but you could shift it a little bit by changing that a little bit. And so it's like picking the best camshaft. It's the same kind of thing. To the sprint car guys that are doing it, they pay a high dollar amount for every horsepower. It would seem like it would cut power a few. I would doubt that the sprint car guys would do that without having tested it because they are so horsepower conscious. And the guys that do sprint car motors are pretty sharp. So I would hope that they would have already tested that. We've seen a lot of exhaust testing at Westech, but not on 950 horsepower sprint car motors. Would you do a big bang out of big block Mopar? No, that's not high on the list. Not an extension like a loop pile accomplished. I don't know what a loop pile is. We just know that when you change the collector length extension, that it definitely has an effect on the power curve. Packaged as the 4L Slippy Killer. Yep. There's one optimum length for 1 RPM. You have a whole bunch more that you need to add to that statement. All I know about header primary length is that on a Mercedes V12, they all the same length. It sounds really good. And on Subaru, if they're not the same length, it sounds really good. Can we get an LQ4 only big bang video? We already did that. The first Gen 3 6-liter that I did the big bang on, the one that made 1480, was an LQ4. How about an RPM activated runner length? Yep. That's what Mazda did on their 4-rotor. Is there a way to plumb 2 of those log stall manifolds together into a Y pipe into the hot side? Yes, you could do that to run. Are you wanting to run a single with both sides? Yeah, that it's modular, so you can do that. Is there a 90 degree on the end of the exhaust? It could be for dB limit. It turns away from the microphone. Yeah, we've had to do that before too. That's what I was wondering, but I'm just curious about the length change and if they did a megaphone or they did something weird to exit it. Lost Man stage restoring a World War II BSA motorcycle. Apparently there's a bunch of surplus for those. Every single part is still available in the original crating. Wow. Hi, what are you doing? What's your name? Oh, what are you doing? Here, they can see your nose. Look, there's my nose. What are you doing? What are you doing? I know what time it is. I get it. I know, you know when it's an hour, huh? Come on, get up here. Come here, come on, up here. You get up here. Stop being lazy. What are you doing? What do you want? What do you want? Just a minute. Just give me a minute. Got 1 more minute. Bruno said there's 1 more minute. Yeah, they're awesome. There. I can. I think maybe the next videos I can show you how I ruined a free 6-liter. That would be good. Would you ever test a 3S GTE 2-liter from Toyota? That would be a fun rig to play with in a small car. What is that? What Toyota is that? It's not the Celica all-track motor, is it? Apparently you don't need a runner length. You don't need a runner length for what? Gotta go to Ford Proving Grounds. Yeah, I will let you know if we want to run that. On the no video, what do you attribute the log manifold making more boost? It was smaller than the header is, and so it had more exhaust energy going to the turbo. The old Celica engine. Okay, is it the same? Is that the same as the all-track one? I don't know if they did a different version of that. I think one of the guys from Westech has one of those. He has the earlier all-track. Because then didn't the later one come with a hood opening and a different intercooler on it? more minute. Yeah, I forgot that those the watercraft were making so much power. On that note, it is time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up. I might be back tonight. It's only a couple of hours. But thanks everybody for watching the video. If you have not, please go check it out. And also check out RICHARDHOLDENERPEFORMANCE.com. And obviously shout out to the guys at BTR and all my friends, AFR, Vortec, all that stuff. The dogs. There must be something out front. Darren.